Hiya. So, we're going to go for a drive here in a second, but before we do that, I have a little bit of business to take care of here. In an episode of You Had to Ask, 2 weeks ago, I think it was, Randy Owens, you asked about my camera rig that I use for these driving sequences. Well, I'm going to show you what my camera rig looks like. Prepare to be disappointed. It's not very high-tech, but hopefully it'll be of interest to you. That's the camera there, and you can see that the camera is seat belted into the seat. The seat belt runs down around the middle of the tripod and curls around the leg and then gets clasped, and then that holds it back toward the seat. And then I also have a bungee cord that again loops around the center of the tripod and hooks under the lip of the passenger seat. So that keeps the tripod and the camera stable. So there you go. You asked for it. That is what I use. That's my camera rig that I use for driving around and making videos. You know, Penn Jillette says that he and Teller don't mind revealing how one of their magic tricks is done as long as the solution is beautiful. If it's just sort of like an ugly, kind of messy, technical explanation, then they don't like to reveal it. And I think I've shown you why. Unless you find tripods seat-belted and bungee strapped into truck seats to be beautiful, which maybe you do. I don't know. Let's go for a drive. I've mentioned this a time or two in the past in previous videos, but from about age 12 to age 16 or so, I passed through a young Republican phase, or at least a young conservative phase. And the main catalyst for this was listening to Rush Limbaugh on the radio and also watching him on television late night, because this was during the period when Rush actually had his own syndicated late night television show. He had a half-hour show that where I live, most of the channels around my house that carried it, it was on maybe at midnight or even later or earlier, depending on how you look at it, than that. So I didn't get to see it all the time, but you know, on maybe on Friday night I would stay up late and watch it because I didn't have school the next day. And if I was home sick from school, or if it was during the summertime and school wasn't in, I would listen to his radio show in the afternoon. And this was just sort of a regular part of my early adolescence, and a lot of my opinions about things politically, a lot of my political awareness came from listening and watching Rush Limbaugh. And when I was 12 or 13, and that was really the only regular source for political commentary that I had, I soaked all that shit up like a sponge. I didn't listen to NPR at the time. I didn't seek out other opinions. I didn't seek out people who disagreed with Rush or who came at it from a different point of view. I knew that there were people who disagreed with Rush politically. I knew that there were liberals out there, but I didn't seek out any of their opinions on my own. I trusted Rush to be not just a source of his opinion, which is the only thing for which he should be trusted as a source. I trusted him as a source for news, as a source for facts, as a source for cogent analysis. I mean, I had no other source of input for that sort of thing. So I was a total Dittohead when I was in that age range, when I was between about 12 and 16. I even, for a time when I was about 13, Rush was doing a thing where he was encouraging people to wear awareness ribbons that had been folded out of dollar bills. Like, at the time the big one was the AIDS ribbon, but now you might also be aware of like the pink ribbon for breast cancer awareness. Well, back in the early 90s, the big ribbon was the red ribbon for AIDS awareness. And Rush, for some reason, thought that this deserved to be made fun of. Because raising awareness about AIDS, that's, you know, we got to take the piss out of that. So the concept he came up with to take the piss out of the AIDS ribbon was to make your own awareness ribbon out of a dollar bill. Let me see if I remember how to do this. I was actually a fan of Rush for long enough that it influenced my writing for a long time, for many years, until just really a few years ago actually, the only piece of writing I had ever had published by someone was a piece I wrote for the Herald Mail, an opinion piece, a nonfiction piece for the Herald Mail's teen page that I wrote when I was 13 about condoms. And condoms as a part of sex education, and how I was against it, and I was against schools handing out condoms to students, because at the time that was sort of a controversial issue, and that was something that Rush talked about a lot. Oh, the schools shouldn't be handing out condoms to the kids, you know, that's a terrible thing to do. It's a horrible example. So I wrote an opinion piece, an op-ed for my newspaper's teen page on that subject. I, as a 13-year-old virgin who had never been laid, who never even been close to getting laid, somehow I felt I had some sort of expertise to offer on this subject. So anyway, thankfully that is no longer the only piece I've ever had published. I've had a few other things published as well, but for a while it looked like that was going to be it. So anyway, okay, so you fold the dollar bill into thirds lengthwise like this, and then you just kind of loop it around into a ribbon type configuration, so it looks like that. And like I said, I had an American flag hat pin that I stuck right through the middle of it, and I would wear it on my shirt like that. And that's how I went around school for a couple of months without an ounce of shame. But that phase passed, thankfully. Actually, the Rush ribbon phase passed a lot quicker than the Young Republican phase. The Young Republican phase lasted a little longer, but eventually the dollar got taken off my shirt and unfolded, and got spent on something. Wouldn't it be nice if I could remember what I spent that dollar on? I can't remember what I spent the dollar that had been the Rush Limbaugh dollar on. It'd be nice if I could, though. It'd be cool if it was like, I mean, I was 13 at the time. I don't know. It'd be nice if I had any bad habits, if I could say I gave it to a friend to go buy me cigarettes or something, or I bought like a porno magazine with it or something, or a case of beer. But I didn't. Those are things I absolutely know that I didn't spend it on. The Young Republican phase and the Rush Limbaugh phase ended eventually. It lingered a bit longer than 16, but by the time I was out of high school, it was pretty much over. I do remember in my senior year of high school, right before we graduated, they called us all into an assembly, and we were given the paperwork to register to vote. And I was 18. I had just turned 18. And I did register Republican. But that was sort of the last vestige of my Young Republican phase. And actually, I didn't even want to register Republican. My teacher, who was in charge of the assembly, sort of encouraged us to pick one of the two major parties, because if we didn't, we wouldn't be able to vote in the primaries in Maryland, because Maryland has closed primaries. I wanted to register unaffiliated, and in fact, years later, I did register unaffiliated. I changed my registration, but at the time, I registered Republican. I never actually really voted Republican, though. I never voted in any of the Republican primaries. But anyway, what finally, I think, pushed me away from Rush in general, and from just the Republican Party and the conservative ideology, was when I began to perceive that their protests against bigotry and their denial of things like oppression and negative attitudes toward women and toward gay people and toward racial minorities, that those were all insincere. That Republican politicians and commentators like Rush would very happily pay lip service to things like sexual equality or racial equality, or they would say things like, oh, everybody hates to see unfair discrimination, everybody hates to see people denigrated or treated poorly. And it finally dawned on me that when they said that, they didn't really mean it. That they were just saying that their actions indicated otherwise. That the policies, the measures, the proposals that people like Rush Limbaugh support are not the sort of things that you would be capable of supporting if racial equality or sexual equality or the rights and the treatment of LGBT people were really important to you. And when I realized that, I realized that the whole thing just wasn't for me. That I was no longer one of these people. That was the moment, and it wasn't a moment, it was a long process, but that was what finally pushed me away from Rush, from conservatism, from the Republican Party, just in that whole thing in general, was realizing that they didn't really care about the less fortunate, about the poor, about women, about gay people, about the vulnerable members of society. They didn't really care, even though they often protested that they did care, that their ways of doing things were the best way to take care of people in these situations. As soon as I realized that that wasn't true, as soon as that started to ring hollow for me, then it was over. It was over as far as me and Rush and me and conservatism was concerned. And that was a long time ago now, and I have not looked back since.